Hi, and welcome to our webinar on moving in a tenant. Today we will go over moving in a tenant with housing assistance, mid-month move-ins, future move-in date that needs to pay the first month in advance, and first and last month due at move-in. First, we'll start off by going to Applications under Leasing on the left-hand side. If you are accepting and moving in an applicant, you will first come here to Applications, and if you have not yet done so, approve the application. And once it's been approved, you can click the three dots at the top right corner and select Move in Applicant. If you have an existing tenant that you need to set up in TenantCloud, you will first want to add them as a contact under your tenants. And then you can also go to Contacts, Tenants, and click the three dots at the top right corner and select Move In. From here, you will have two options: Easy Move In, which is a really condensed version, or Advanced Move In. We usually recommend selecting Advanced Move-In as it allows more detailed options. Once selected, click Get Started. On the first step of the move-in process, we will want to select the property and unit if applicable. We can also change the lease number. This is just a label for this move-in inside TC. Some people let the numbers increase each new lease, and I've also seen some people make it the lease start date and the unit number. It's totally up to you. We'll also be able to select the lease type. Fixed will have a start and end date. Month to month will only have a start date and only ends if you manually end or renew the lease. This is a good moment to explain what the lease is in TenantCloud terms. The lease in TenantCloud is referring to the recurring automated charges you've set up for a tenant. The lease agreement would be the actual binding document between you and the tenant. Next, you'll want to fill out the lease start and end dates. You will want to make these dates match the date of the lease agreement or the binding document. So for this scenario, we will do a mid-month move-in or start date. Down at the bottom of the page, you will see the tenant listed. Across from their name, you will have a toggle to share the lease with the tenant or not. If you would like the tenant to pay online, you will want to share the lease with them. Underneath the tenant, you will find the option to add any dependents or people residing in the home but not a leaseholder. For any roommates, guarantors, or housing authority, you will want to click on the box that has the tenant listed and select that tenant from your tenant contact list. I'm going to select a second tenant, which we will pretend is the housing authority. Underneath the tenants, you will see an option to select invoicing type, individually or jointly. Individual will assign a specific portion to each tenant and they will each get their own invoice. Tenants paid jointly would be used for a couple or roommates who want to share one invoice and divide it amongst themselves. For housing authority scenarios, you will want to select tenants pay individually. After clicking next, we will be taken to the transaction page. At the top, you will see the recurring rent option. If you need to set up a move-in without recurring rent, you can always toggle this off here. We'll turn it back on, and here you can set the invoice schedule. As you can see, the first invoice date will autofill to the lease start date. If you charge rents on the first of the month, you will want to make this the first of the following month for a prorated move-in. You can see here that the rent was split into two portions since I have chosen individual invoicing, but you can change these amounts to fit your need. Since I am setting this up as the second tenant is a housing authority, let's say they pay all of the rent, but you still want the lease to list the tenant. You can go ahead and put 0 for the tenant and the full amount for the housing authority. Next is the deposit section. As you can see, there are many different subcategories under deposits, so you can select what fits best. For the deposit invoice date, you can select a date prior to the lease start date if you would like the due date on that deposit invoice to be before the move-in. The invoice amount will do the same thing as the rent and be split up, but you can again change the separate amounts. We'll go ahead and add a pet deposit too and make that the tenant's responsibility instead of the housing authorities. This will be the same with the invoice date. You do have the option to make this date prior to the lease start date. Down at the bottom will be the other lease transaction section. Here is where we will want to put the one-time prorated rent invoice for the first and only partial month of the lease. This section is also where you'll want to put any other monthly or one-time charges. Since she'll be paying pet rent every month, we'll go ahead and make a monthly pet rent starting on August 1st, and then we can again change those split amounts. Since her first month was prorated and I need to also charge a prorated pet rent, I'll add that under this section as well as a one-time invoice with a invoice date the same as the lease start date. I'll hit continue. And the next page will be extra fees and utilities. At the top of the page, you'll be able to set up the late fees. If you have the same late fee terms for all of your properties, you can set this in your settings under the accounting section on the page titled Invoices and Late Fees. When it is set there, it will automatically default to those settings for every move-in, which can save some time. As you can see, you can do one-time or daily late fees. For the maximum monthly balance, you'll want to take the monthly charges plus the maximum amount of late fees you can charge. Since this tenant's rent is $1,500 and I can charge as much as $500 a month for late fees, I'll set it for $2,000. Below that is the grace period settings. These can also be set within your settings. As you can see, once I set the number of days and time of charge, the system will tell you below exactly what day of the month and the time the late fees will be posted for this tenant. The next section will be the management fees for any of our property managers. This default can also be set per property on the property page under portfolio in the owners tab. The first toggle will be the management fee for the first recurring rent posted. The second toggle is for all the months following. Turning these on will prompt the system to make management fee invoices automatically whenever the rent invoice is posted. The system will again tell you the exact amount the invoice will be below the setup. The next section is a great new feature for setting up utility providers. Here you can toggle on all the utilities the tenant needs to put into their name. Once these are toggled on, the tenant will be able to click a link within their TenantCloud account that will take them to the appropriate provider to create an account. This will then mark the utility as fulfilled on your end. If you click on View Providers on the bottom right-hand corner of this section, you will be able to configure the utilities and confirm that the system has pulled over the correct providers for your area. If there is a required utility that does not show a provider, you can add the appropriate company by clicking Add Provider, filling out the information, and clicking Add. After you've looked over all the providers, you can click Done. Now that we're back on the extra fees and utilities page, we can scroll to the bottom and mark which utilities the tenant is responsible for versus what you will be covering. Then you'll hit continue. On the last step, you will be asked whether you want to make renter's insurance required or not. When this is made a requirement for the tenant, they will have the option to purchase insurance through Assurant, but they can also instead put their existing policy information in to share with you. After this, we will hit complete move-in. Once that is done, we will see a pop-up that asks us if we would like to request e-signature, upload an already signed document, or send a move-in inspection to the tenant. We'll go ahead and request a move-in inspection before sending the lease for e-signature. You will then be taken to the inspections page where you will select the sections you will require the tenant to fill out and the inspection's expiration date, then hit Request Inspection. Once that's sent, I'll go ahead and click on the tenant's name on the inspection to take me back to her profile. I'll then click on the Leases tab and view the active lease, aka the move-in that I just completed. Once in the lease page, if I needed to upload a previously signed document, I could view that under the Agreements tab, and by clicking Upload, I can upload any previously signed agreements there. Shared attachments will be shared with the tenant and cannot be deleted. Private will be just for you to view. I'm going to request an e-signature, so I'll go back to the lease agreement section and click Request. From here, I'm going to look through all the templates to select what I want to send. So we'll find the Texas lease agreement and click Use Template. Once this loads, you can see that the system has filled most of it out based off of the information I entered during the move-in process. I will then go through and review the documents and fill out any of the gold text box assigned to me by double-clicking inside of the box and typing the answer. I can see that there is a green autofill element that doesn't have any information, and that's due to the fact that the document says security deposit, but I only charged a regular deposit. So I'll want to search the autofill elements for the deposit amount and drag that over. And then I'll continue filling out any gold boxes assigned to me. If I'm done filling it out, I can scroll up and click Preview on the bottom right side column and look it over. I notice my deposit autofill is a little bit bigger than the rest of the font. So I'm going to go back to the editor and resize that. It looks like I also forgot to fill out the text box at the bottom. So if you click on the deposit autofill box and then click on the right side to change the font size, and then I'll scroll down to the bottom and make sure that my signature is filled out and that I fill out all of these text boxes at the bottom. And once I'm done, I can scroll down and click Send a Review to send to the tenant for e-signatures. As you can see, it has been sent to the tenants for signatures, and if you close out of that small pop-up, you can see how many people have signed it and that the signature is pending. Last, I'll go to each tenant's profile to make sure the invoice that should be available to pay are posted. As you can see, Jane Doe has all of the invoices in the amounts assigned to her available to pay. Now I'll go back to the lease and scroll down and click on the Lease Transactions tab. There I can make sure that the first invoice is posted for August 1st and to see when the first invoice will post. If I click Actions at the top right and then Edit, I can change the lease number, lease type, and start and end dates. If I need to edit the rent, I will want to go back to that Lease Transactions tab, look at the Recurring Rent section, and click on Edit Recurring Rent. I can change the schedule, due date, and amounts here. When I make any edits to the dates, amounts, tenants, etc., I will receive a pop-up asking me if I would like to send an updated electronic lease to tenants. If I need to edit any other recurring transactions, I can click on the three dots to the right of the listed recurring transaction and click Edit. Down at the bottom, I can click Edit Late Fees if I need to adjust those as well. And if I need to edit my management fees, I can click Edit Management Fees. Since I need to go back to the tenant's profile, I'll scroll up to the top of this page and look at the small green font to the upper left of the page and click on the tenant's name. I can see her outstanding is correct, so she is all good to go. The next scenario we'll go over is someone moving in a couple of months into the future, but you need the first month rent at the time of deposit. We'll first go to our tenants under contacts and click the three dots and then move in. We'll go ahead and do advanced move in again. And we'll go through the same steps on the first page as before. This tenant will not be moving in until September 1st, so a couple of months from now. Once we're on the lease transactions page, you can see that the first recurring invoice defaults to the first of the month, which is the start date. But since we want that September rent invoice up front, we'll actually do the first recurring invoice on October 1st. We'll then go ahead and add the deposit. And I can make this invoice date the lease start date or a date prior. Under other lease transactions, we'll actually add the September rent invoice here as a one-time invoice. This will ensure that the September rent invoice posts immediately after we complete the move-in process so that the tenant is able to pay that as well as the deposit invoice. Let's also say that this tenant has a pet and you'll be charging pet rent as well. First, we'll go ahead and add the pet deposit under deposits. And this pet deposit can have the same invoice date as the regular deposit. Under other lease transactions for the pet rent, since you want all of September up front, you'll actually want to do the monthly pet rent starting on October 1st. And you'll also make a one-time invoice for the pet rent for September so that this will show up immediately after the move-in process as well. Once we're done adding all the invoices, we'll hit continue and we'll be taken to that extra fees and utilities page and we'll fill that out the same as we did before. Complete, I'll hit continue. And since I don't have an email for this tenant, I'll go ahead and skip the renter's insurance requirement. From here, I'm going to go ahead and just request an e-signature this time. So I'll click request e-signature. And I will go through and find the first document template that I would like to use and click use template. Once it's loaded, I'll go through and make sure everything looks correct and fill any boxes out that are assigned to me again. Once I'm done proofreading, I'll scroll back up to the top and click the plus sign add next to the template 1 to add my next document. Since this tenant has a pet, I'll also want to send a pet addendum. I'll proofread this as well and fill out any gold boxes assigned to me. I'll scroll back up one last time and click add the lead-based paint agreement. Again, I'll proofread this and make sure everything's filled out correctly. At the bottom, you can see there's some lines that are leaving spaces for signatures. So I'll go ahead and drag signature boxes over for me, the lessor, as well as a date signed for me. And then also a signature box for the lessee, the tenant, to sign. Once I'm done, I will scroll down and click Send to Review. It will ask for an email since I didn't have one, but it also isn't letting me send, so I will need to go through and review everything to make sure I didn't miss any boxes. And it looks like I missed a box on the pet addendum, so I'll fill that out and click Send to Review again. After it's been sent, I'll want to go back to the tenant's profile and review the transactions to make sure that the September invoices are posted to their account so that they're able to pay them in advance. As you can see, there's the September rent, September pet rent, the pet deposit, and the deposit all there for them to pay immediately. This means they are all good to go and set up for their future date move-in. One last scenario I'd like to show briefly is when first and last month's rent is due at the time of move-in. Since we've gone through these steps a couple times now, we'll quickly fill out the first page and I'll set the move-in date for August 1st. For the rent, since his first month is August, but I want that up front, I'll again choose the first of the following month. As you can see, since I had this tenant moved into a different property, the deposit he's paid is already on file. This is not the usual, so here is where you would add the regular deposit. You will also want to add the last month here as a deposit as well so that you can apply this to the last invoice of their lease when the time comes. I'll leave that invoice date as the start date. Below, under other lease transactions, you'll want to add the first month's rent with the lease start date as the due date. This way the tenant will be able to pay this along with their deposit and their last month's deposit. We'll hit continue and quickly go through the next page. This time I'll turn off the renter's insurance and we'll also skip the e-signature for time's sake. We'll go back to the tenant's profile and there under the transactions you can see the first month and the last month deposit posted. We'll go ahead and pretend they've since paid the last month's deposit. We're also going to pretend that they've been with me for a year and now the July 2026 invoice has posted for their rent or their last month. So I'll post that really quick. Once the last invoice has been posted, since I have their last month in the form of a deposit, I will go to that invoice and click Actions at the top right and then Apply Deposits. Next, it will ask me what deposit I want to apply towards the invoice, and I'll select the last month's rent deposit, check the box to confirm, and then hit Confirm. If we now go back to his profile, we will see that amount deducted from his deposit balance, and the last month rent invoice is now marked as paid. And that's all for moving in a tenant. The 3 scenarios shown today can seem overwhelming when trying to translate the real world into software, but we hope that this webinar helps bridge the gap. Thank you for joining and we hope to see you at our next one.